Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessa, and I'm so happy you're here for this episode of Better Sex. I've dedicated my professional life to helping couples enjoy a fulfilling, intimate life. I believe that sex is important. Our connections to other people matter, and we're not living our life to the fullest if we aren't connecting emotionally and sexually with our partner. That's why I'm here, bringing ideas and information to help you live and love better.
Hey, thanks for being with me today. I'm really glad to be presenting this episode. It's about sexual desire issues, libido issues, but it's a different approach than usual. I mean, in my online community, the Sex, Intimacy, and Relationships Facebook group, I asked what people's most common presenting problem is, and they talked about sexual desire issues. So some of that is desire discrepancy and how we deal with that with a partner, but some of it is just a struggle with libido. And while there is a medical aspect to that, could there be illness or menopause or medications? Sometimes there's a relational aspect to that. What's going on with you and your partner that you might not be interested in sex? Is it the sex you're having? Is it the meaning of the sex? Is it other dynamics between the two of you? But there's also an energetic component to it. There's the looking at our body in a holistic way, thinking about the balance in our body, the energies of our body, what's flowing and what's blocked. That's another way to look at libido and what might be going on with people. So I have a guest today to talk about that. Brodie Welch is a licensed acupuncturist. She's a board-certified herbalist. She's a Chinese medicine expert. She's a health coach and a self-care strategist. She's the founder of Life in Balance Acupuncture in Corvallis, Oregon, where she's been treating patients since 2003. And she's on the show today to talk specifically about what Chinese medicine is, how it views sexual energy, and what might be happening with a lack of sexual energy, and some ideas about what people can do or be thinking about in trying to improve the situation. And certainly we end with where to find a qualified professional to help you. So hope you enjoy the show.
Hey, Brodie, thanks so much for being with me today.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic, right? Holistic approaches to libido. That's what we named this, right?
Sure. Yeah, that works. That works. I think that really just that people, from a Chinese medicine perspective, everything is energy. And so sexual energy is just kind of a subset of energy, right? And so if everything's energy, it becomes hard to talk about. So we have to subdivide it into these various ways.
Well, why don't you lead off and tell, what is Chinese medicine? Like, give us some background on that, and how do you define it? What do you do with it?
Well, most people know of Chinese medicine through the sexiest branch of it, which is acupuncture, right? So acupuncturists are practitioners of Chinese medicine. The other branches of Chinese medicine are Chinese herbs, using herbal prescriptions to change the balance in the body and to address whatever symptoms may be present by addressing their root as well as their manifestation. Also, bodywork, things like massage are ways of moving energy through the body. Qigong, energy exercise, as it literally translates, which is essentially like Tai Chi and Qigong are both ways of they're like the internal martial arts. They're a way of working with your own Qi or energy to move it around your body, use it for self-healing, etc. And then diet, of course. So if everything that we eat or put into our bodies needs to be, has the potential to energetically take us into balance or out of balance, as everything is either warming or cooling. Everything goes to a particular organ system, and it is going to be, and every taste has a function in the body. So we look at, so those are the 5 branches of Chinese medicine, all of which an acupuncturist will be familiar with. And so, yes, I practice as an acupuncturist, but really I coach people about how to apply Chinese medicine to their daily lives and to their daily choices, because so much of it really is stuff that we can do on our own. It's not sticking needles in our own bodies or doing acupressure even, but working with these principles, we can talk to the different organ systems and then think about balance in that way. So Chinese medicine is a complete system of healthcare that's at least 3,000 years old, probably closer to 5,000, and has been, is practiced continuously in China and has since made its way to the West. And so there's all sorts of, it's not a monolith. There's multiplicity of traditions within Chinese medicine, but there's a lot of ways of thinking about how to create balance in the body to address really anything that you don't need an ER for, one could consider Chinese medicine for.
Wow. Okay. So this is more than I've known about it before. It's interesting to hear that even exercise is considered a medicine,
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Like with health and balance.
Exactly. And breathing, right? Like we know that breathing is central to whether or not we are in fight or flight mode or rest and repair or rest and digest mode. Our breath is the bridge that takes us from one to another, which is why for like the chronic, pretty much everybody is dealing with something that's made worse by stress.
Yeah.
And one of the first pieces of self-care homework I give my patients is to teach them how to breathe and teach them therefore how to hack their nervous system to get out of this constant state of stress and get down into the business of resting and digesting, which is incidentally, if fertility is a concern, also like where we need to be in order for those things to be happening.
Wow. All right.
The other thing to mention too is Chinese medicine is like the original body, mind, spirit medicine, right? So like the idea that matter and energy are the same thing, they're converting into one another all the time. Our thoughts affect our physiology affects our thoughts and emotions. That goes from the food that we eat to our mindset when we digest it to really everything in life that we're doing, the pace of life, how we move through it, our beliefs. That Chinese medicine considers all of that one and the same. And so it's really and incidentally, acupuncture is fantastic for things like depression and anxiety.
Wow,
Anyway, so it's really, there's a lot to it. And so with sex and sexuality and libido, it's like, obviously these are physical issues, but they're also emotional issues. They're also, and they're can be past trauma at work that Chinese medicine is fabulous at being able to uncover. And so really there's just a whole lot there for someone who's interested in terms of like, how can Chinese medicine help me have better sex? Well, let me count the ways, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it sounds like underneath of this whole thing is what would you call it? A philosophy or a belief or a focus on balance?
Yeah. The orientation really.
Yeah. Okay.
So if in allopathic medicine, the idea is like, we don't even have a definition of health in quote unquote Western medicine. It's the absence of disease or illness. And in Chinese medicine, we consider health, as this dynamic balance of yin and yang in the body, and yin and yang being these sort of archetypes, right? That everyone can sort of picture the yin yang symbol, the black and the white serpents sort of chasing each other is a model of the universe, and it's a model of what's going on in our bodies as well, right? So it's like we know that day and night balance each other, and we cycle through the seasons, right? That we go from the cold of winter to the warmer of spring to the warmest of summer to the cooler of autumn to back to winter again. That's sort of like the yin yang flow of the year, and all of this is happening. That model of change in the environment is happening inside our bodies as well. And so that's, and really like within every single organ system, there is an active, motivating, transforming, warming part of it. And there's a cooling, restful, peaceful, calming part of it, that being the yang and the yin respectively.
Right.
And so both of those need to exist in order for us to be healthy.
Okay, so that's what's really striking me is this model of health that Chinese medicine has and these different avenues towards whether it's acupuncture or exercise or diet or herbs, towards health. But it's almost like, I guess you use them in conjunction with each other, but it also seems a little bit like any road leads to Rome. Like any
Sure enough. Yeah, you absolutely can use any of them as a standalone medicine because really, so the idea is that we're looking at the body holistically and we're saying like, what's out of balance in this given organism, in this given ecosystem, really?
Right.
Like we're not even an organism, we're an ecosystem. And so we think about that we look at all the systems together. We ask you the 10,000 questions. We look at your tongue. We take your pulse. We get a sense of like what's going on in this organism as a whole, in this ecosystem. And then we give that imbalance a particular diagnostic name, right? So like too much chi stagnation, for example, like energy is not flowing in this particular organ system, or there's not enough of this kind of energy, yin or yang, in a particular organ system or in the body as a whole. And then we can go after that with any tool you want, really, and some are more effective and fast acting than others. But absolutely, like that's why I think it's so empowering, and why so much of my work has gone from working with patients in clinic to taking people through like coaching, really. Teaching people about their daily habits, because what we do every day is going to be just as powerful, if not way more so, than what somebody can do in an office visit.
Right. That makes sense. Now, remind me at the end of our discussion to get back to that breathing that you teach, because
absolutely,
I think that'd be a fabulous thing to leave the listeners with, is something, the concrete that they could put into practice.
Well, it's something they can get for free on my website as an audio download about how to breathe. So they can totally go to brodiewelch.com, and I can give you the link for the show notes.
Okay,
that works.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. All right. So you're talking everything's energy. There's this constant flow and balance. So how do you see sexual energy, or how do you talk about that within Chinese medicine?
So if we can think about each of our internal organs with a capital letter, right? So thinking about your heart, not just with a small letter H that pumps the blood and is this organ in our chest, but the capital H, heart, is responsible for not only pumping the blood through the body, but also memory, also uniting the different aspects of our consciousness. Also, so it's got like a bigger job. It's got than just the system that we think of, that we know and love. So the 5 major organs that we could think of in Chinese medicine are the liver, the spleen, the heart, the lungs, and the kidneys. And the kidneys, capital K, they're the lowest in our body. They are said to govern basically everything from the lower back down. And the kidneys are paired with the bladder. So they're the water element, and they have to do with the water in our bodies, but also that which it has to do with what we want to create, our innate potential in life, and the ability to pass on literally our genetic material, and in the form of eggs and sperm, right? That sort of our reproductive system energy is considered to be ruled by the kidneys, which is kind of like the pilot light of the whole organism. It's like the root of yin and yang in the body. But very specifically, so when we think about kidney yin, for example, kidney yin is that which produces the bodily fluids that allows us to feel calm and stable, and that enables us to sleep through the night, for example. Whereas kidney yang gives us our motivation. It gives us our get up and go, including our any sort of drive, desire, and including libido. So if somebody has low libido, we could say that they have low kidney qi, or very likely low kidney yang. Right. And if we think about really kind of like why that might be, the kidneys are also the sort of the reservoir of this reserve energy that we can tap into, kind of like the adrenals, right? Like we call upon them as a source of, give us something extra in this moment because we need it to get out of an emergency. It's like, we dig deep, we pull down from the depths, and we liberate this kidney yang energy to get us through an emergency. And really, like basically that what we're doing is like, ideally we should be living off of the energy that we create by the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, and the positive digestion of our life experience. It's like, that's where qi should be coming from. And we should be living within our energetic means. But when we're doing too much, like packing our days super full, pushing through tired, right? Propping ourselves up with caffeine and sugar, not giving ourselves the rest that we need, overdoing in any way, then we start dipping, we start using up the qi and blood that we're producing every day and dipping down into our reserves, which is the kidney domain. Chinese medicine, we have this model of this magic substance called Jing, which we can think of as like the sand in your hourglass. And when you've used it up, your time is up. And so if you think about people who are look old before their time, they usually have been not too kind to their bodies, right? Like they've been doing too much. They've been doing drugs. They've been, if we look at, like the presidents, right? Their gray hair is, in 4 years, they look totally older, that kind of thing. So really trying to do way too much, having a high stress life or taxing the body with things that stress it cause us to dip into this reserve of Jing, of this life force that we're endowed with when we're born. And we can't really get it back. We can just slow down our rate of consumption.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about sort of an energetic overdraft in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Except you can't repopulate it.
Right. The only way, I mean, like that you can't ever repopulate the, like, sort of what's given to you at birth. Like that's like what you get is what you get. And so people who are born with like super strong constitutions, it's like they got a lot of Jing, like the runts of the litter didn't get quite so much, like that kind of thing. But we actually can, if we are eating super nourishing food and digesting it super well and living in complete balance with like activity and rest and we digest our lives in a way that gives back to us where we feel good, then we actually can produce some interest in our bank account and we can live off of that. Okay. And so that's how, if we want to like preserve optimum health well into old age, for example, right? That's another myth about sexuality, right? Is that your libido just tanks when you get older. And it's like, part of that is because your Jing is tanking. It's like you've been burning the candle at both ends for way too long and you don't have the reserves that you have when you're 25. You can't stay up all night partying anymore. So it's the kind of thing where like you have a little less to work with. Doesn't mean that there's no hope for you. It just means that you really need to like do your meditation. It means you need to like have a relationship with your nervous system where you're not stressing out all the time, where you're not constantly digging into that reserve energy, and where you're giving yourself, what your body needs to digest.
Hi, it's Jessa here, taking just a quick break. Thanks for listening so far. I wanted to let you know about the sex quiz that I've put together called How Healthy Is Your Sex Life? I've taken a close look at the typical ways that I see couples get into trouble with sex, including avoidance, neglect, negativity, distraction, and boredom. And the free quiz will score your individual results based on these factors. And then I provide my recommendations and ideas, including my top 10 sex tips, which will help you make instant improvement. If you'd like to take the quiz and see how healthy your sex life is, you can do it right now at sexhealthquiz.com. Okay, so I have two questions on that. One is, if I understand you right, that kidney yang, right? Mm-hmm. That energy, it's not just about sexual energy. That's correct. Your whole get up and go in your whole life, right?
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
And so if you're in energetic overdraft, is that the first place that shows up? Is that loss of energy, like feeling like I'm just sluggish and not really?
It can be. I mean, like there's really nothing is universal in terms of it, like just where things are going to show up for people. So it may not be, but it's the sign of like anything that goes on long enough is going to affect the kidneys. So whether that's a chronic illness, or a chronic lifestyle depleting kind of thing, when you get to that point of like, wow, I just don't have anything left. Like despite a good night's sleep, I'm still tired in the morning. Right. Those kinds of things might be diagnosed as like low cortisol or, like those kinds of things. But I made an allusion earlier to fight or flight mode versus rest and digest or rest and repair mode. Ideally, like our nervous systems evolved so that most of the time we are in this rest and digest, rest and repair mode, and we're only in an emergency mode when we're literally in a life-threatening situation, running from a tiger on the savannah, that kind of thing. And most of us spend way more time in fight or flight than we need to about things that are in no way life-threatening, right? Deadlines, our schedules being packed, like being cut off in traffic, like just these things that like, okay, they're really not threatening to our deep down survival, but spending so much time there taxes our system. It's very expensive for our hormones and our sex hormones. Like for women, estrogen and progesterone come out of the same bucket that adrenaline comes out of, right? And all of the hormones that need to be released to counter that adrenaline and cortisol surge that happens. It's like all of that's part of the kidney bucket. And we're always going to prioritize running from predators over having like a juicy, yummy reproductive system, right? That is it's going to just be a secondary concern. And that makes sense, right? Like if it's not safe, you shouldn't be necessarily thinking about bringing a new life into the world, which is, of course, the primates that we are. That's the message the body gets is like, okay, like shut down the digestion, shut down the long-term construction, like stop healing that cut, stop fighting off this infection because we need to get away from this tiger. None of this is going to matter. And so the idea that like, yeah, when we're stressed out, we will deplete our kidney yang and there will be very little left over for sexual interest.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many clients I have heard say, I'd rather get sleep than have sex. You know, like it just shows how depleted people are.
Yes, exactly. And ideally it's not like pitting a healthy sex life against sleep, or I don't have time to work out or get enough sleep. Which one should I do? Or I can't meditate and make breakfast. It's like, yeah, you can. Like it just means that everything else has to get a smaller slice of the pie.
Right. Definitely adjustments have to happen in order to make these changes. So how can people get more access to their sexual energy? What do they, we're probably describing things people recognize.
Yeah.
Remember these listeners, right? So what can people do?
Well, I think that really like looking at lifestyle has got to be the first step. So look at your energy budget and ask yourself, am I in integrity with my natural energy? Am I routinely overspending my bank account of energy? So
people are going to say yes to that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So then so how could things be different? Like what needs to go? What is absolutely a priority? Where do you really want to put your attention? Because that's where your energy will go. And what do you need to subtract? Like what could you maybe say no to? What could you change about your life so that it feels more easeful? Is there a mindset shift that you could make whereby it doesn't seem like a giant emergency after a giant emergency? Like, so it's really going to depend. But I think like it starts with subtraction. Like most of us are just doing too much. The next thing I would say is check your relationship with stress. Because if you don't have a way of managing stress, whether that's exercise or a mindfulness practice or something like Qigong or breathing a few times a day, like if you have an out of control relationship with your nervous system, it's really hard to drop into your body enough to feel like you want to have sex.
Yeah.
And so, those two things, but and then of course there's a whole bunch of tactics we could go down to manage the nervous system and work with it. Breathing is, of course, the simplest and most readily accessible to all of us, no matter where we are or what we're doing.
Yeah. With each of these branches of Chinese medicine, can you give us just a little highlight about what the approach would be with low libido?
Sure. So the beauty of Chinese medicine is that there's not like one diagnosis for one condition. Exactly. So like there's a phrase like that, one disease, 1,000 causes, and one cause, 1,000 diseases.
Yeah.
So that's something to know that bioindividuality is real in Chinese medicine.
Right. So nobody take this as medical advice.
Yeah, it's totally not medical advice. However, I will say that the women that I treat who come in stressed and exhausted, these are the first two things. Like, I'm like, okay, well, whatever I do in this office is going to totally be superseded by what you're doing in your daily life. So what can we do here? So, but if we're treating with acupuncture, really acupuncture in general is a profound nervous system reboot. It is like, it will just drop you immediately into parasympathetic, and most people fall asleep on the table. And a lot of times it's like, that's just like all that you need is that reminder of like, oh yeah, it doesn't have to feel so tense and tight all the time. And so acupuncture, profoundly relaxing in addition to its therapeutic, like move the liver chi or nourish the kidneys or, like whatever it is that we're doing. But then, and usually for things that affect the kidneys that have been going on for a while, usually 3 months is about the span of time that one should expect for things to get back into balance. And this should be no real surprise, right? If you've been living out of balance for a very long time, giving it a few months to get back online is usually pretty understandable.
Yeah.
Even just a few months of Chinese herbs that nourish the kidney yin and yang or whatever's needed, move the liver to help deal with stress, can also be really powerful and important. And usually Chinese herbs are the more cost-effective way of going. If you're depleted and you need to be nourished back, herbs and food and lifestyle are like applied from a Chinese medicine perspective, I think are going to be more powerful medicine. A lot of times with acupuncture, if there's a pain issue involved or a trauma from the past or that kind of thing, acupuncture can be fabulous for moving that energy, decreasing pain, decreasing inflammation, and helping the body really file it differently, right? So like that whatever sort of emotional charge there might be in a relationship pattern where sex has become a charged issue,
Right.
or, and of course, like sexual violence and trauma being so ubiquitous in our culture, a lot of times that leads to chi stagnation in the pelvis area or wherever in the body. And so like being able to literally bring back to life this area that we will wall off or like take our awareness out of, or in extreme cases dissociate from entirely, that it's an invitation that the body is in fact safe and you can come home and you can get life force to flow back through these areas. And so it can be incredibly powerful.
Wow. And it sounds like the way you're talking about that is people that have had trauma. Well, just like you said, one cause 1,000 diseases, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not going to have a blockage in the same place. I mean, you really have to
Right.
figure out what's going on with each individual.
Yeah, and there are also definitely energetic tendencies. Like there's a meridian that goes around the waist that we call the belt vessel, which is often where any trauma is stored. Regardless of its nature. But anything that we're holding on to that sort of blocks us from being really present with our lives, right now. Is often stored there. And so there's particular points that are particularly good for releasing the past or just freeing up the flow of chi, as we would call it, like allowing, especially if you're not wanting to have sex because, for example, like you have terrible PMS and cramping for a week and a half. It's like acupuncture is great for that, So being able to move through physical discomfort, it's a great tool.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've definitely heard about acupuncture for pain and physical conditions, but not so much for releasing something like trauma. It's sort of what I think of as a psychological thing.
Well, and it's really interesting.
An energetic thing.
It's a hugely energetic thing. And so like the new research about things like depression, right? That turmeric has been shown to be as effective as Prozac for depression. It's been speculated because of its anti-inflammatory properties. Similarly, I believe in Canada, their equivalent of the AMA or like their medical establishment up there, acupuncture is like a first line treatment for depression, because of its anti-inflammatory properties. So it's like up there with medication, and we're taught to think that medication is the only way, but it really, acupuncture can be profound for psycho-emotional stuff.
Yeah. And then what about, I don't know if you have anything to say quickly about diet, if people are struggling with libido, like in terms of balance, or is that just too individual to know what people might be?
That seems like it's bordering on like some medical advice I'd rather not give. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But the idea of balance in your diet, I suppose.
Yeah, well, sure. And specifically the idea that you can use, like, so for example, you can support the kidneys. Oftentimes things that are like, if we think about like the germ cells, right, like sperm and egg, right, that they are the very beginning of life. So what else is the very beginning of life? Well, a seed, right? So a lot of times it's the seeds that help to, or seeds or nuts, for example, could be nourishing to the kidneys in general. Also, like eating eggs, for example, like that's a way of nourishing the Jing. And so that's an idea of that there is, you can use food as medicine, specifically like which part of the plant or which part of the animal can be used to support a given system of the body. So if it is the kidneys that we're talking about, also things that are associated with, that have a salty taste to them, because kidneys are the water element. And so things that are slightly salty. So things like black beans or celery, potentially, like that have, or pork that have like a mildly natural salty taste to them, not necessarily like potato chips. Right.
Yeah. I would imagine like processed foods and sugar and all that kind of stuff is depleting no matter what you're dealing with.
Well, yeah, exactly. Depleting. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And inflammatory in general. Well, also the warming spices, right? If we think about like, if you're the kind of person that's like, you're lethargic, maybe you're depressed, like you've lost that sort of like motivation and zest for life and you're cold all the time, that things that like invigorate, that warm and invigorate, like, so cinnamon could be nice, or like dried ginger or fennel or, like things that have like some warmth to them that also are nourishing to the kidneys. But really, it's like the food and herbs, like you really do want a differential diagnosis from somebody who does Chinese medicine.
Right. And are there specialists in these other branches, or do you recommend, do people need to be with somebody that's like a certified acupuncturist that might also have these other branches sort of developed? I mean,
how to find a qualified practitioner, especially in this day and age where practitioners can be wielding needles with like only a weekend workshop worth of training and things like that. It's like,
wow.
if you want to, like doctors, chiropractors, physical therapists, they're practicing like dry needling, like that, those kinds of things that like seem like acupuncture, but they're not necessarily someone who's studied Chinese medicine. Yes, there's something to the democratization of acupuncture, which is a beautiful thing. But at the same time, like there's a big difference between someone who's taken a 3,000-hour master's degree program that's 4 years long and has 1,000 clinical hours and has studied all the branches versus someone who's trained in a different medical modality, but happens to use needles in their practice.
Okay.
So to find somebody who's certified in Oriental medicine, totally not a PC term, but that unfortunately is currently the standard. You can go to nccaom.org, and that's how you can search for a practitioner who knows Oriental medicine, not just acupuncture or Chinese herbs. And so that means that they'll have studied more comprehensively the theory. And of course, practitioners differ as to how much patient education they're interested in doing. It's like I'm a natural teacher. It's like I have an online course on the basics of Chinese medicine. I want everyone to know as much as possible about how to take care of themselves. That's not everybody's approach necessarily. Right. So I would say like that, if you're wanting to find somebody qualified, the first stop could be NCCAOM to find people in your area, and then talk to them, see if you can find a good fit, check out their website, see if they, generally speaking, people who have resources available that have things to do with patient self-care are going to be probably a better bet.
Right. Good place to go. Okay. And how can people learn more about you specifically? And what would you like to promote as we wrap up here?
Well, a couple things is I have a podcast. It's called A Healthy Curiosity, and it ties in really anything. It's about being well in a busy world. And I have guests from functional medicine as well as Eastern medicine of various stripes. Like I blend my expertise in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and yoga and health coaching with whatever my expert wants to talk about. So we have really interesting conversations over there. My website is brodiewelch.com. That's Brodie with an IE and Welch with a CH. And if you're the kind of person who needs help and support in implementing, like, what you need to do to take care of yourself, but you're not actually doing it, I have coaching programs available. If you're interested in Chinese medicine and want to geek out on that, I have courses in that too. I also have an online Qigong class where you can learn Qigong from anywhere, video, audio, that kind of thing, as well as the free breathing break that I mentioned earlier. So a bunch of resources there.
Great. So I'll make sure to get all those links from you too, so we can put them in the show notes and make it easy for people. Wonderful. Good. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
It's been a pleasure, Jessa. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.